Well, the title I've given this talk, or series of 2 talks in fact, is St. Alban, Christian Rosicross, and Elias the Artist, the guiding light into the future. Well, this is the first talk of a series of the 2 talks that I'm giving on the lights in heaven that provide guidance for the Rosicrucian work on earth, then, now, and into the future. So this year, 2023, the year in which I'm giving these talks, is the 400th anniversary of the 1623 twin publications, the Shakespeare First Folio and Francis Bacon's De Dignitate et Augmentis Scientiarum, which means, it's Latin for of the dignity and advancement of science. Now, the twinning of the 2 1623 publications on Earth echoed the Saturn-Jupiter Great Conjunction in heaven, which occurred that year, which in turn twinned the previous Great Conjunction in 1603 that was joined in 1604 by a super bright supernova in the constellation of Ophiuchus, with the nova in Cygnus shining brightly in the Milky Way. As prophesied by Paracelsus, the 1603-4 celestial display marked the appearance of a great light called Elias the Artist. And the Rosicrucian fraternity identified this great light with their father, Christian Rosicross, with the supernova marking the opening of his tomb and the start of making the Rosicrucian work public. These celestial phenomena, together with the previous super bright supernova in Cassiopeia in 1572, identified to the initiates not only who and what this great light was, but also how the Rosicrucian work was to proceed on earth. And these lights, heavenly and earthly, still provide a great guiding light into the future and act like Hermes, the way-shower. And St. Alban the person and St. Albans the place are connected with all this. But to start with, I need to provide you with some background as to how the society or fraternity of the Rosicross came about. Now, according to Michael Meyer, the Society of the Golden Rosicross had been founded under that name in 1570 by members of an earlier secret society that had been established in London in 1510 by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa von Nettensheim, similar to one that Agrippa had set up in Paris. Now I'm going to share my screen from now on. So that's Agrippa that I'm showing you now. Agrippa's secret society in Paris was known as the Sodalitium, which means community, of which he was styled the Imperator. And esoterically, the society was known as the Magi's community, being one of several such societies spread throughout Europe, who collectively were referred to as the Order of the Magi. These societies were of individuals who were involved in the Renaissance stream of wisdom and new discoveries, and who corresponded with each other, studied each other's works, and met up with each other whenever they could. And members of the English Magian Society used to meet at Sir Thomas More's home. Now, this home hosted a Renaissance-style Platonic academy to study the liberal arts and sciences, including number and geometry, and the development of Christian morals and virtue. A constant stream of visitors from home and abroad visited the academy, and More was consulted by scholars, poets, statesmen, and kings far and wide. And Nicholas Bacon, who was later to be Sir Nicholas Bacon, Queen Elizabeth I, Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, was a member. Now in 1527, before he even became a lawyer, Nicholas Bacon visited Paris, where the early French humanist movement was developing. And this humanist movement led to the formation of the French Pleiade of poets, Henry III's, that's Henry of France, Henry III's Palace Academy, and Bernard Paliss's Petite Académie. In particular, Nicholas Bacon contacted the more mystical Erasmianism, which developed into the remarkable fellowship known as the Family of Love. And a great many important people, widespread throughout Europe, are known or suspected to have belonged to this fellowship. And the Family of Love was linked with the Pleiade of poets, that's the French poets, and all those behind the French Renaissance, which culminated in a great outburst of poetry, music, and learning in Paris in 1581 to 85, before its eclipse on the continent through the horrific wars of religion. The familists believed that each person's inner spiritual life was what really mattered, and that, compared with this, adherence to officially established forms of religion was of little importance and might be changed as circumstances dictated. Now in the 1530s, when Nicholas Bacon was a lawyer and ancient of Gray's Inn, he came into the circle of influence of Sir Thomas More, then Lord Chancellor. Nicholas Bacon took up the humanist and Platonic ideas that More and the others were promoting, thereby becoming a member of More's Platonic Academy as well as of the English Magian Society. And in 1537, Nicholas Bacon began his career in royal service as solicitor of Cromwell's Court of Augmentation. His department was involved in administering the various church properties and lands that the Crown had confiscated. And he became, that's Nicholas Bacon, he's not a Sir yet, sorry. Nicholas Bacon became concerned that the revenues of the dissolved monasteries should be put to useful purposes, and saw that what had once blessed the light of learning in the Middle Ages could again bless the light of learning in the English Renaissance. An opportunity to do this occurred in 1538, when Archbishop Thomas Cranmer recommended Bacon to the King's Chief Minister Thomas Cromwell, who then chose Nicholas Bacon, Robert Carey, and Thomas Denton to advise on the establishment of a new Inn of Court for the training of the King's students of the law for the public service. The three-man team drafted out a scheme for a college not just for lawyers, but also for the advancement of learning of young noblemen and statesmen, including crown wards that could be supported by the monastic revenues. And the proposals included the establishment of a house in London where young men of good family and attainments might be taught law, policy, and languages, ancient and modern, amongst other things. Officially, the proposals met with little favour, and the monastic estates were distributed by the king amongst his friends. So the scheme had to wait until Henry VIII's daughter, Elizabeth Tudor, was crowned Queen of England for it to come to fruition. And meanwhile, privately, Nicholas Bacon devoted a large part of his time, effort, and income to supporting and developing the secret Magian Society. And then we have from 1547 to 1553 Edward I's reign. That's Henry VIII's only son. And then from 1553 to 1558, Queen Mary's reign, which was his eldest, Henry VIII's eldest daughter. And before daybreak, on Thursday, 17th of November, 1558, Mary Tudor died, and Elizabeth Tudor succeeded to the throne of England as Elizabeth I, the Queen of England. The first dated official document of Elizabeth's reign is the minute of a meeting of Privy Councillors held in Elizabeth's presence on the following Sunday, 20th of November 1558, at Hatfield Palace, which had been her home during the last 2 years of Mary's reign. The intervening 3 days between Mary's death and Elizabeth's first Privy Council meeting are usually overlooked or shrouded in secrecy, but they were immensely important and key to the success of establishing Elizabeth safely on the throne of England. From various surviving documents and other evidence, we can discover that not only was Elizabeth's succession to the throne of England of vital importance for the furtherance of religious and educational reformation and national freedom, but that it was carefully prepared for and planned by the authors of the English Renaissance and Reformation. Now, of these authors, Nicholas Bacon was a principal one, wielding a hidden power or authority equal to or even greater than even Sir William Cecil. And others like Thomas Parry and William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke, were also privy to the plans. And thanks to the authority that this secret Privy Council had, and helped by their many agents and sympathisers working quietly on their behalf on the continent, immediately upon Mary's death, the ports were closed. Amazing. And this meant that news of Mary's death could not straightway reach the King of Spain's ears. And even 10 days after the event, it could still be denied in Brussels, where Philip II of Spain was staying. Now, those present at Elizabeth's formal reception at Hatfield Palace on Sunday, 20th of November 1558, who were made official members of Her Majesty's Privy Council, included Sir William Cecil, who was sworn in as the Queen's principal secretary, and Nicholas Bacon, who was soon after knighted and sworn in as the Queen's Lord Keeper of the Great Seal at Somerset House on 22nd of December 1558. And then given the additional powers of Lord Chancellor on the 14th of April 1559. And Sir Nicholas Bacon and his brother-in-law Sir William Cecil were now in a powerful position to promote the advancement of learning and the development of the Magian society. And this was done at their various homes in London and the country, as also at Gray's Inn, of which Sir Nicholas Bacon and Sir William Cecil were prominent members. And indeed, Gray's Inn became famous for its special type of training, not just for lawyers, but also for aristocrats and others who entered the Queen's service as courtiers or statesmen. It's also a place where most of the poets flourished as well. Now, on 22nd of January 1561, Francis Bacon was born. And to quote, either in York House or York Place, end of quote, as William Rawley notes in his Life of Bacon. The alternating birthplace is important because York Place was the Queen's Palace, later known as Whitehall, whereas York House was Sir Nicholas Bacon's London residence as Lord Keeper of the Great Seal. Indeed, from various evidence, we can gather that Francis was the Queen's firstborn living son, his father being Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. But as soon as he was born, he was given away for adoption by Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne Bacon. Now, Lady Anne Bacon was the Queen's principal lady-in-waiting, as the Queen was, as far as the general public were concerned, unmarried, and she intended to stay that way. In 1561, shortly after Francis's birth, Sir Nicholas Bacon purchased Gorhambury Estate near St Albans to be the family home for his second wife, Anne Cook, and her two sons, Anthony and Francis Bacon, the former being a natural son, the latter adopted. Sir Nicholas's choice of Gorhambury St Albans is noteworthy, as he had other choices for building a new house on other estates he either already owned or which he could have purchased. And Hope Bramald, the Honorary Secretary of the Francis Bacon Society, when I first met her in the 1970s, informed me that Queen Elizabeth commanded Sir Nicholas to purchase Gorhambury Estate and build a new house there for the upbringing of her natural son Francis, whom Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne had adopted. Now, regrettably, I haven't been able to find any written record of this, but I've always thought it possible, because in terms of the landscape zodiac of Britain, which was known to the English Making Society, St Albans is in the 13th sign of Fiacus. I'm pointing to St Albans now, and this is a picture of a Fiacus holding the serpent. So St Albans is by the hand that holds the serpent. Now, the 13th sign is the 13th seat of King Arthur's Round Table, wherein sits the heir to the throne. Now, the Tudor Queen Elizabeth always saw herself as the Queen of the Round Table, the Fairy Queen, as Spencer's book of that name spells out for us. As the Tudors, beginning with her father Henry VIII, saw themselves as the royal descendants of King Arthur, and went out of their way to re-establish the Round Table of knights and ladies. Now, Gorhambury Estate lies to the west of the town of St Albans, and on the opposite side of the river, Ver, to the medieval town. So I'm pointing to the town of St Albans, and St Albans Abbey, and this is Gorhambury. And a large part of Gorhambury Estate occupies the site of the Belgic oppidum, which means fortified settlement, known as Verlamion, a principal settlement of the Catavalorni tribe that became the capital of Tasceovanus, the king of the Catavalorni, from 20 BC until his death in AD 9. Verlamion covered a large area, stretching from the high ground of Pray Wood down to the river Ver in the valley below. So this is Pray Wood, the high ground, down into the valley. So that's remains of a dike of the whole oppidum. And through it passed the ancient Celtic road, Sarn Widlin, which means Irish way, which according to British tradition had been made into a causeway in the 5th century BC by the famous High Kings Malmutius, the great lawgiver, and his son Belinus. Sarn Widlin, later renamed Watling Street, stretched from London, then known as Caertroia, to Snowdonia via Highcross, the centre of Celtic Britain, and it formed one of the two major axes of Britain. The other axis was the Sarn Foss, or Foss Way, stretching from Lincoln to Bath, which crossed Sarn Widling, or Watling Street, at High Cross. I'm pointing to High Cross now. The Romans later paved these great causeways, as well as adding many more roads across the country. When the Romans invaded Britain and occupied it, they made an alliance with the Cativaloni after defeating them in battle. And they replaced the Belgic capital with the smaller and more compact walled town of Verulamium, sited next to the river with Watling Street running through its middle. So that's Verulamium. And half of the site of Roman Verulamium lies within Gorhambury Estate, including the Roman amphitheatre where plays were performed. So I'm pointing to the Roman amphitheatre now, which is in the estate of Gorhambury. And Verulamium was where the Romano-Celtic St. Alban once lived, and where he was interrogated by the Caesar of the time and sentenced to death. And St. Michael's Church is on the site of the Roman Basilica, the law court on the northeast side of the Forum, where St. Alban was judged and condemned to death. Pointing to St. Michael's Church now. And St. Alban's Abbey, which is now a cathedral, is built on the site of St. Alban's martyrdom, which I'm pointing to now. And St. Alban was the founder and first Grand Master of Freemasonry in Britain, later to be known as England. And for this reason, St. Albans is said to have been the birthplace of English Freemasonry, craft Freemasonry. A speculative Freemasonry was to be founded later by the second St. Alban. And the second St. Alban was Francis Bacon, who in 1621 was created Viscount St. Alban by King James. Now going back to Sir Nicholas Bacon. In 1563, Sir Nicholas Bacon began construction of his new house, which was on higher ground than that of the previous medieval manor house. And this was to become a Platonic academy, as well as a home for his wife and their two sons, Anthony and Francis. And of note is that the chapel in the house, access from the hall, was constructed so that its entrance was in the east and its altar was in the west, as per Solomon's temple, wherein the Holy of Holies with the Ark of the Covenant was in the west, opposite the entrance in the east. And the walled orchard garden behind the house was entered via an arched gateway surmounted with a statue of Orpheus, whilst in the garden was an octagonal banqueting house depicting the liberal arts and sciences on its walls. Now, Orpheus. Orpheus is a name meaning fisherman, and he was the great poet and reformer of the Dionysian mysteries, which was the predecessor of the Christian mysteries, wherein Jesus was the fisherman, the exemplar and reformer of both the Orphic and the Judaic mysteries. And Jesus taught and initiated his disciples to be fishermen and sent them out into the world to fish for souls, to lift souls from the waters of natural life and into the air and fire of celestial life. And the 8-line verse above the arch gateway to the orchard ends with these 2 lines. Orpheus, who is my cultivator, is also cultivated by me. Long may our cult and our affection flourish. Now this implies that Sir Nicholas Bacon was, like Orpheus, a cultivator, and the English Magian society that he headed was an Orphic Christian cult, whose members were also cultivators, who cultivated society as well as the land, using the arts and sciences, especially poetry, music, and the theatre. theatre was important, as Dionysus, known to the Romans as Bacchus, was the patron god of theatre. Now, Anthony and Francis Bacon were brought up in all this and educated to be Orphic cultivators, which indeed they both became. On February the 25th, 1570, Pope Pius V issued the bull Regnans in Excelsis, which declared Queen Elizabeth of England excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church and deprived her, as far as the Pope was concerned, of her sovereignty in England and Ireland. And the papal bull released Roman Catholics from any loyalty to Elizabeth and called upon them to remove her from the throne. It also gave papal blessing to any Roman Catholic prince or king to invade England and depose the Protestant Queen of England. And 1570 was also the year, according to Michael Meyer, when the English Magian Society decided to adopt the name Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross, which I think they almost certainly did as a declaration of support for the Queen and what she represented. Heraldically, the Golden Cross is the same as the Red Cross, and is the special attribute of St. George, the spear-shaking patron saint of England, as also is the rose. St. George is thus an archetypal image of a rose-crossed knight who fights the dragons of ignorance and vice with a spear of light, so as to transform ignorance into knowledge and vice into virtue. St. George is the human equivalent of the Archangel Michael, or Michael, spirit of the sun and heart, and leader of the hosts of heaven. And the Greek equivalent of the Archangel Michael is the sun god Apollo. And Apollo's partner is Pallas Athena, whose name literally means spear shaker or Shakespeare. And Pallas Athena is the Greek name for Britannia, the goddess of Britain, whom the Romans called Minerva. Hence the title of Henry Peacham's emblem book, Minerva Britannia, published in 1612. The title page of Minerva Britannia depicts a curtain hiding an author whose right hand reaches out from behind the curtain, writing Mente videbor, which is Latin for by the mind I shall be seen, writing this on a scroll. And cryptic signs lead the reader to pages 33 and 34. On page 33 is the picture of a gauntleted hand and arm holding a spear, and the knight holding the spear is invisible. And page 34, which is behind page 33, is addressed to the most judicious and learned Sir Francis Bacon Knight, thereby emphasizing that this is the otherwise hidden knight. And it contains an emblem picture of an Arcadian shepherd holding a spear and piercing a serpent with it. The first verse of the emblem explains that the shepherd pierces the serpent so as to extract the serpent's fat, which can then act as an antidote to the poison of the serpent's bite and enable the wound to heal. And the second verse of the emblem explains that the shepherd represents the virtuous king who can make wholesome laws that either prevent or take away the sting of foul vice. And such laws can be laws of the land, made by the sovereign king of the land, which all citizens are meant to abide by, or else philosophical precepts to live by, made by a philosopher king such as Solomon. In Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, he refers to himself as Solamon, the second Solomon. And the dedication to Minerva Britannicus, page 34, addresses Francis Bacon as the most judicious and learned. Judicious and learned refers to law and philosophy, and is the key to interpreting the verses. The laws and judgments are made by a king, and philosophical precepts by a philosopher. And the combination of the two is what is needed. Now in 1572, a super bright supernova appeared in the constellation of Cassiopeia, the heavenly queen, and shone brighter than Venus until 1574. It could even be seen in the daytime. So I'm pointing to it now. And the constellation of Cassiopeia is in the Milky Way. Any new star, for instance a nova or supernova, appearing in Cassiopeia, was taken as the appearance or birth of a child of light in heaven, which is echoed on earth by the appearance or birth of a similar child of light born of a terrestrial queen. And Cassiopeia is recognizable in the sky as 5 bright stars forming a W or M shape in the Milky Way, depending on which way you look at it. So I'm pointing to it now. The Cassiopeian supernova had particular significance in England at the time of its appearance, as not only did Cassiopeia constellation equate with the British Isles when projected onto the globe, but also England was ruled by a queen, thereby fulfilling the Hermetic theme, as above so below, as below so above, for the doing of the great work. This image of the celestial globe superimposed on the terrestrial globe that I'm showing now was made by David Rumsey and is from David Rumsey Historical Map Collection. The celestial globe itself was made in Rome in 1792 and is constructed from 12 engraved globe gauze. And the heavens are shown as they would be seen by an observer looking from the centre of the Earth. The W shape of the Cassiopeia constellation is symbolized here in the much enlarged shape of Cassiopeia's throne, on which Cassiopeia sits as the Queen of the Heavens. The stars, however, are above the British Isles. The outlines of the countries and continents of the terrestrial globe can be seen in yellow, so I hope you can see it. There's the British Isles. There's Great Britain I'm pointing to now. There's Ireland. That's the rest of the continent of Europe. Mercator's celestial and terrestrial globes were owned by many of the wealthy intelligentsia of the time, including the Rosicrucian magus John Dee, who was gifted globes by Mercator, whom he knew. And having seen the supernova and realized its significance, from then on the English Rosicrucian Society, who believed the Hermetic idiom, as above so below, as below so above, for the doing of the great work, directed the poets and artists to portray Queen Elizabeth as the Virgin Queen, Cassiopeia or Astrea incarnate on earth, who brings with her a golden age. And this suited the English Queen very much, and also gave fire to the Rosicrucian educational work. Robert Flood, writing decades later, said that the sudden appearance of the Cassiopeian star in 1572 had marked the beginning of the Rosicrucian work, which was then prepared in secrecy until the great 1604 stellar event, when the Rosicrucian work was made public and spread abroad. Notably, 1572 to 1604 is a 32-year period, wherein 32 signifies the number of degrees of initiation required to rise up the whole Kabbalistic tree of life, mastering all 22 paths and the 10 Sephiroth, after which one goes beyond into the 33rd degree. Now in April 1573, at the age of 12, with the Cassiopeian star blazing away in the heavens, Francis Bacon entered Trinity College, Cambridge University, accompanied by his brother Anthony Bacon. Whilst there, and whilst the supernova blazed away, Francis had his great vision of his life's work. And he there and then, supported by his brother Anthony, resolved to put it into practice. On 25th of September 1576, Francis Bacon was sent to France from Her Majesty's royal hand, where he stayed for 3 years. Francis was only 15 when he was sent abroad, which was not usual at such a young age. And the statement "from Her Majesty's royal hand" also meant that he was specially sent by the Queen, with the Queen's direct authority and blessing, and by her command. For someone still so young, this was not only a privilege, but also an extraordinarily unique thing for the Queen to have done. This in itself indicates that the teenage Francis was someone who was considered of extra special importance to the Queen, as well as now being completely included in and dedicated to her service, as indeed one would expect of a firstborn son and potential heir to the throne. Francis' older brother Anthony, for instance, was not able to go until the end of 1579, when he reached his maturity, which is 21 years old, and he wasn't sent from the Queen's royal hand. When Anthony did go, it was at the request of William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, Anthony's uncle, who asked Anthony to act as an intelligencer in charge of a network of spies and sending the collected intelligence back to London to Sir Francis Walsingham and Burleigh, who then informed the Queen. And Anthony was to spend 12 years abroad, visiting and residing in Switzerland, France, Bern and Navarre, and possibly Italy, during which time he made many friends, including Theodore Beza in Geneva, Michel or Michael de Montaigne in Bordeaux, and Henry, King of Navarre, who later became Henry IV, King of France. Now, whilst Francis was in Paris, the first AA Gemini headpiece was printed on a volume of Hebrew grammar made specially for him. The AA Gemini headpiece became a special symbol and signature of the Rosicrucian fraternity that was used in printed works, either authored by them or inspired and overseen by them. And such works included the Shakespeare works. And sometimes the AA hieroglyph was used without the Gemini, or vice versa, the Gemini without the AA, but their connection was known to those in the know, or with eyes to see and wits to understand. But I will talk about this another time. Now, when Francis returned from France in 1579 on the death of Sir Nicholas Bacon, the AA headpiece started to appear in English publications, and the Rosicrucian advancement of learning really took off, instituting the full flowering of the English Renaissance. And 12 years later, in February 1592, Anthony Bacon returned to England from France. On Sir Nicholas Bacon's death, Anthony had inherited Gorhambury, but it remained the home of his mother, Lady Anne Bacon, while she still lived. So from February 1592 until April 1594, Anthony lived chiefly with his brother Francis, either at Gray's Inn in London or Twickenham Park Lodge, or else at Gorhambury when visiting his mother. In December 1592, 9 months after Anthony Bacon had returned to England and teamed up with his brother Francis, 2 new stars, or novas, appeared in Cassiopeia. And this was, to the 2 brothers, representative of themselves acting as the Gemini in their brotherly love for each other and their work together, following Francis's great vision and their father's preparatory work. The Gemini are children of Leda and the Swan. Thus, symbolically, they are each a swan. The Gemini were also known as spear shakers and were considered to be the guardians and guiding lights for all seafarers. The twin novas were, therefore, a confirmatory signal for the Gemini spear shakers' work to be born, that is to say, to be made manifest on Earth. So, the very next year, Shakespeare was born. And here I'm going to stop this talk and carry on in my next talk, which will follow on from this first talk. So I hope you've enjoyed it and managed to take it in so far. Thank you, thank you, thank you.